Hey everybody, John here. I just wanted to introduce this episode of Mac Stories Unwind because we had some technical issues with our guest's microphone. Myke Hurley joined me, and it was a great conversation, so I didn't want to just toss this one out. Apologies for the fact that Myke sounds like he's sitting on the other side of the room. He was being picked up through my mic, but be that as it may, I have cleaned it up as best I can, and hopefully you enjoy the episode. Thanks. Welcome to Mac Stories Unwind. This episode is brought to you by iMazing. I'm John Voorhees, and I have a special guest for this episode with me, Michael Hurley. Hey, Myke.
Hello. When you do Unwind, do you have to sit back or anything like that? Is there a different vibe?
There is a different vibe. You have to relax. Okay. You have to be ready to tell a few funny stories.
Oh, I have one of those.
Oh, I know you do. I know you do. Let's dive right into it. I mean, because I told you a little something about myself this week that I think you were fascinated by.
I would expect that people that listen to the Mac Stories Extended Universe would be aware of the fact that you were born in France.
Correct. Although I don't think I've mentioned that too many places. So I think there'll be a few people surprised by even that. But
so where are you born in France?
A town called Chinon, which is in the Loire Valley, which is where a lot of the French wines come from. A lot of great white wines come from there. My dad was in the army during Vietnam, and he was a doctor stationed in France.
That is a set of things I don't fully understand.
That is probably a good place to be if you're in the Vietnam War.
Because you're not really in it.
You're not really in it. It was an army hospital in the countryside of France. My parents moved over there. They lived in an outbuilding of near a chateau. I mean, it was very much a rural.
So I expect then that was for soldiers hurt enough that they were going to go home.
I think so.
They would take them out of Vietnam, take them to
bring
France,
them to Europe,
and bring them back home again.
Exactly.
That makes sense, but there's a funny thing in the Vietnam War. He was stationed in France.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a bit lost,
right?
But that is interesting on its own. But the piece of information that you shared with us is that you, how old were you?
6 months old.
At 6 months old, traveled to America on an ocean liner.
I did. And
did you confirm this, by the way?
I did. I confirmed it.
You weren't 100% sure when you told us.
It's true because I hadn't spoken to my parents about this in a very long time. But they were over there for at least 2 years, I think it was. And I was only 6 months old. They didn't want to take me on an airplane. This was 1966. And they did not want to take me on an airplane. They wanted to kind of have a leisurely transition back to America, too, after being in France for 2 years. So they booked an ocean liner and sailed across the Atlantic back to the United States.
I would imagine a plane was pretty expensive.
It probably was, too. It probably was. I don't think there's a lot of ocean liner traffic across the Atlantic these days, if at all. But it was still a thing then.
It would have been more then, right? Than now. Do you know how long it took?
No, it was many days. But and part of it also was they had all of their possessions with them. It was like if you're moving coast to coast in the U.S. and you hire a moving van, instead of hiring a moving van, they hired an ocean liner to pack all those big boxes and furniture.
I have friends that have moved across the Atlantic, and they take a plane, but their stuff comes in on a boat.
Right.
I've known that to happen.
Right.
I've just never met any. I don't think I've ever met anyone who has themselves sailed from Europe to America or backwards.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like it's got to be today quite a rare thing for someone to have done that. I mean, because if you would have maybe been a year or two later, probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I don't think that was a big thing in even the 70s or 80s or anything like that. It's very much a 40s, 50s, 60s era type of thing. Yeah,
it's probably right on the tail of it.
Yeah.
That is a very fun John fact. Right?
Yeah, it is a fun John fact. I've got a lot of weird little facts like that from the past. But
and that's why I'm blinded.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The other reason I wanted to have you on the show today, Myke, is because Federico and I have all these old stories about WWDC, but you and I go back even further at WWDC. We go all the way back a full decade to 2013. We're getting to be old men on this WWDC thing.
It's like a funny thing where it's like I've been trying to find a way to say it because this is my 10th WWDC, but 2 of them I didn't go to.
Right, same.
Because they didn't exist.
Same.
So it's a weird thing to say, but I would. It's been 10 years since my first WWDC, our first WWDC. It was when it was back in San Francisco. It was the iOS 7 year, right?
Yep.
10 years later. But like that was like a really interesting one to go to. But yeah, I consider this my 10th WWDC.
That was when the Trash Can Mac Pro was introduced too. I actually got to see that under glass, just like they did with the iPhone back in the day.
Yeah, and while this is my 10th WWDC, it's the first one I've ever been to.
I've
never been to one before.
Well, it's my second. You and I were supposed to share our first. Remember that? I mean, we were both.
Last year.
Yeah, exactly. We were both invited last year. You got sick, unfortunately, and weren't able to attend. But it was really. I think this one was really special though because all of us were there and we're all there together. Which last year, Federico wasn't here either because he was in the midst of his move.
I'm still missing Steven though.
And that's true. We were missing Steven.
I'm happy he came out when he first, because at first he wasn't sure if he was going to make it because he couldn't make Monday.
Right.
I was like thinking to myself, like, do you really want to come just Tuesday, Wednesday? I'm actually really happy to do it.
Yeah, I am too. I just ran into him randomly heading over to the podcast studio earlier in the week with you and Dave Smith, and it was really nice to see him. I mean,
so I'm happy that he did, but it was more of us than last time. I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, last year you wouldn't have experienced this since you were stuck in a hotel room, but last year people were far more hesitant to get together still,
of course, especially earlier in the week, right? And I don't. No one would see me, which I understand why, but like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday,
no one would come anywhere near you.
Because like, why would you want to ruin your week? Because everybody had things kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you had to test for all of them, right?
Right.
And so like it made sense that like really I only saw anybody from like Thursday, Friday. We'd like hang out outside very far away from each other in this courtyard.
Yeah, that's right. That's where I saw you and Adina too. And on like Thursday was exactly it after everything had died down. Yeah, it makes sense. But
I was radioactive.
You really were. You were super radioactive, and not in a good Spider-Man way at all either.
In a really bad way.
Yeah, in a really bad way. But
before he gets these powers.
Exactly. No, but it was different because of that, right? Because people were more cautious. There was all the testing. There was fewer get-togethers, so it had a different vibe. This year, I think, had more of a regular WWDC vibe.
Yeah.
Thanks to this week's Mac Stories Unwind sponsor, iMazing. iMazing is the must-have tool for everyone who prefers or needs to manage iPhone or iPad devices locally from their Mac or PC. Whether you're an individual, family, small business, or enterprise, iMazing is delivering powerful and easy-to-use solutions for working with your Apple mobile devices and their contents. The features include things like backing up an iPhone or an iPad to external storage or a NAS volume, with snapshot support, just like Time Machine, but for iOS devices, which is super neat. Browsing the contents of a device, exporting any data from them, or exporting or printing things like SMS, MMS, iMessage, and WhatsApp messages, including attachments and metadata, which is great for both preserving family and friend memories as well as business purposes. And you can easily place a device in a kiosk mode. This is a great way to repurpose old iPads as a photo frame, for instance, or to have a dedicated FaceTime device. You can even create blueprints and bulk configure devices locally with iMazing Configurator. Plus, migrate your business from one MDM solution to another without losing any device data. It's a fantastic app with a long list of features beyond even the ones that I've mentioned today. You can try iMazing for free by going to imazing.com and downloading it today. Do that right now or use the link in the show notes to let them know that you're coming from Mac Stories Unwind. Again, that URL is imazing.com. Our thanks to iMazing for their support of the show. But going back to 2013, we met at a bar called The Chieftain.
Which was, at that time, was like one of the places that people would go to. Like, in hindsight, I don't know why. It was a very small pub. I think it was because it was opposite the convention center.
Yeah, I think that's right, because there weren't actually that many of those kinds of places right near the convention center.
Get a drink and just be in that place.
Right.
More like restaurants and stuff. But like if there were other options, the Chieftain wouldn't be the place that people would have gone, I feel like.
No, it was pretty close to what you would consider a dive bar, which Federico and I talked about on here a few weeks ago.
It was an Irish pub, and it felt like the American Irish pub kind of interpretation kind of thing.
Right.
It had that vibe to it. And it was just no disrespect on the Chieftain. It was just like a strange place. And I think later on, in later years, towards the end of San Francisco's run, it became hotel bars.
Yeah, it really did. With Park 55 was where we hung out a lot.
Because when I went in 2013, I didn't even know where to stay. Like, me and Steven came together. Steven had been to Macworld that year. And WWDC was my first time in San Francisco as well. And we stayed. There was a hotel next to the Moscone. Like, just before you kind of got out into the street. It was just like one door.
Intercontinental, was it? No, oh, not that one.
It was like Jupiter or something like that. Okay. It was not a bad hotel. Like, I had a friend who stayed in a hotel that had shared bathrooms. It was just like a nothing kind of hotel. Yeah. But like, it was right next to it. We didn't really know where to go, so we stayed there. But then later on, in later years, people would coalesce around certain hotels. And we would stay at the Park 55 a lot, and they had a really large hotel bar. Yeah,
they had a really big bar. I did a lot of interviews in that bar one year in 2016. That Federico's, remember, including the workflow team, just sitting in the bar, and it was not exactly the best audio in the world, but it was a lot of fun. I just had people rotate in all day long and interviewed them. But I went with my son.
Yes,
my oldest.
He was a Swift.
He was no, it wasn't Swift yet. It was back then. You had to write an actual Objective-C iOS app. You had to build a full app, and he won the student challenge, whatever it was called back then, for his app. He was 16, and those days when you won, everybody who won got a ticket, free ticket to WWDC, but you had to pay for your own plane out there and housing and everything, and you found out very late, like. No more than 2 weeks before the event. So we were scrambling. We found a hotel. We stayed at one. I think it ended up becoming the Westin. It was something else at the time. And I was, as the parent, I was able, this is long before Mac Stories. This is before I made an app or anything of that.
You were still a lawyer then.
Yeah, I was still a lawyer then. And I was to accompany him on all these things. And so we would go over to Moscone, and Apple would let me in the door and let me wander around the halls. And they had a little holding pen for the parents where we could wait for our kids. They wouldn't let me into the sessions, and I badly wanted to go into the sessions.
Why don't they just give them, what do they do now?
I have no idea what they do with like the parents and stuff, because I didn't, even though we interviewed some of the students for App Stories.
A little bit older now.
Yeah, I didn't see any parents at this thing, but they were probably there somewhere.
And even then was on the young side.
Yeah.
People that win that kind of thing.
Probably. He was 16 at the time. Yeah. And so we spent the week when he wasn't doing sessions or other things, activities, trying to meet some developers, because I figured it would be good for him to kind of meet the people who are doing this for a real living. And so we went to a lot of the parties. He was 16, but I brought him to the bars. So I took him to the Chieftain, and we went to the Chieftain, and we ran into you.
Yep. I remember it vividly, actually. You came over and introduced yourself. And maybe I was familiar with you at the time.
I knew, a little bit, maybe. You and I knew each other. That was around the time you and I were getting to know each other. Yeah. I can't remember if we knew each other a little bit before, or it was this.
I think we'd spoken before, but not like, we weren't friends then.
Right.
And you kind of introduced yourself and introduced Owen and was telling me about the app that he was making. And it was something about fitness. Yeah,
he was doing like a running log type of tracking app.
And you gave me like a Moo card or something like that. And so we were talking, and then I think another day at that WWDC, we hung out a little bit, and then the subsequent, I think, year. Were you making Blink then?
Not yet. I was starting to work on it, but I hadn't
I think maybe you told me your idea.
I think I told you about it then, because it didn't come out until like spring of 2015, I think.
Yeah, and then I guess... Then, moving forward, then you started writing for Mac Stories, and we've been thick as thieves ever since.
Yes.
It was 10 years now, which is wild.
It is wild. And Myke is the one who introduced me to Federico, actually. I mean, it was...
matchmaking.
You are the matchmaker. No, you really are, because that was right before, that WWDC was right before you guys started the prompt. I mean, literally weeks, right?
It was like the next week.
Yeah.
June 12th, I think it is 10 years of the prompt.
And I remember you guys told me that you had found a third person and that you were going to do it with Federico. And I knew his work. He and I were aware. It's the same thing. Like you and I at the time, we were aware of each other, I believe, but we weren't really friends or anything. And a couple of years later was when you convinced me to send him a story that I was working on related to my app.
Me and Stephen were doing the 512 podcast back then. And then we felt like there was an opening at the time for a panel show, like a group show. It was really, at that time, talking about Apple. There weren't many options, which is kind of wild.
It's funny to think of, right?
It was earlier then, and Mac Break Weekly was the big show at the time,
mm-hmm.
and we felt like that we could kind of do something in the vein of like a fixed panel and with some rotating guests, but we did more of that in the beginning than we did later.
Right, yeah.
And then ultimately it ended up just becoming underscore. We just get underscore on every year.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about,
Yeah, like initially it was going to be more of that, but because we didn't really know what the show was going to be.
Right.
But we felt like we could bring a different perspective, partly because of where we are, like, all were in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the idea of an American, an Italian, and an Englishman, it's just like, it was like a very different thing. And we were all younger too, so it's just like we grew up in a different era.
Mm-hmm.
Because Stephen, I don't think, was as focused on history then. Like, it's something he cared about, but it's something that he grew into.
He wasn't writing about it as much, right?
He was more. We were all kind of more modern. I mean, I guess, I think I don't even remember at that point just how deep on the iPad Federico was. I think he was, right.
He was, because he was using. He started with the Mini, I think, back in like 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
It was close. It was around that time, but it was a little bit before.
So that all came like the week later.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was. It's funny to listen back at those old prompt shows. I actually did that a couple of years ago. I listened to the first episode again.
3 accents that don't exist anymore.
I know, especially Federico.
No, I heard.
You think you too?
No,
well, that's true. Stephen had a much.
I used to say he doesn't say it like that anymore.
That's true. That's true.
I think Stephen's accent has changed the most out of the three of us.
Interesting.
We've all changed.
Yeah.
And I would, for me at least, maybe I need to re-listen, but I think maybe Federico's has changed the least, but it's definitely different.
Yeah.
I think for him, he's just more confident. I think that's just been the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's probably true too.
Because I remember I had to really convince him, because he just wasn't sure if he would be, if his English was good enough.
He was worried about his English skills, which
that was never a problem. I mean, like, that first episode, like, it ended up becoming a strength. Because the people who listen to it may remember, but if you don't, there was a technology called timer coalescing.
Yes.
And I don't even remember what it was for.
There's some deep, low-level developer thing that makes things faster.
Federico pronounced it like timer coalescing. And that idea of, like, it just became like a very funny little meme for the show for a while.
Right.
So, like, it ended up showing that, like, the accents were a benefit to the show. Like, immediately. People found it quite endearing. And I think it's like been over 10 years into this.
Yeah, no, it is fun to go back and listen to that. I think everybody, develops and changes a lot over time. Once you've recorded hundreds and thousands of episodes like you guys have,
I mean, we all speak to each other for so many hours that we pick up things from each other. Sometimes
that's true too.
Phrases, but a lot of the time, all of our accents are like meeting in the middle. I feel
right.
If we did it another 15 years, no one would have an accent anymore. We'd all stand.
We'd all have exactly the same voice too.
But I think it's just normal, right? Like you pick these things up, and as we're growing up, it's like, why do you have an accent at all?
Right.
It's just because the people around you speak a certain way. It's
right.
like nothing to. Like if somebody was born in Italy but never spoke to a person, they're not going to speak with an Italian accent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? That's just not going to happen.
Well, and if you're like Federico, now you do this weird combination of Italian and English that he showed me the texts he sends to Sylvia, and it's like this weird mashup of Italian
that's the same all over. Like,
and English.
It's the same. Like,
Yeah.
we're speaking to our friends, like some words are English and some words are Romanian.
Right.
And I would expect that, like Adina, Federico's Italian is probably funny to his friends now.
It is, yeah. I
He
think
probably speaks Italian more like an American would speak Italian than an Italian speaking Italian,
which is probably horrifying to him.
Yeah.
So tell me, Myke, how is your first WWDC been? Since this is a big thing for you. Yeah,
like is how I feel right now.
Uh-huh.
Like, I said on maybe like Tuesday morning or something, I just feel completely content.
Yeah,
and like that is not necessarily a thing that I would have felt like it would have been like maybe exciting, And I've also, this is a hard thing I think for some people to understand, and I get why. If you've had dreams in your life and you succeed them,
mm-hmm.
it can actually be a little underwhelming sometimes, because once you achieve the thing that you've worked for, well, then what?
Right, exactly.
And so I've been lucky enough in my life to achieve my professional goals, and this is one of the last ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I was worried about that, but also cognizant of it. So if I did feel that way, I didn't really feel like it was going to be a letdown. But I've experienced that before. But now I kind of come to understand what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that's good.
This just exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
And so after watching the keynote and having that whole experience, I was just completely content, right? Because it was, the only thing missing for me is actually seeing a presentation, but I don't think that's ever going to happen again. So it's just
I don't either. I kind of feel the same way in the sense that for a lot of years I tried to get in either as press or through the lottery, and even with the lottery, I think I lost the lottery 4 times. The right to the lottery to spend $1,500 or whatever it was, and I never went. And I don't really. I mean, it would have been nice. I definitely would have been nice to have seen the whole keynote on stage, but I don't think we're going back.
No.
And even though it's weird that we're sitting out in the grass watching a screen of something that we could watch from our hotel room or homes, but at the same time having the people around you and the developers, that's what really makes the defense.
I always did it, right? So every WWDC that I've been to before, we would either go to a viewing party. We did a couple of those. We did one at Twitter, one at in a hotel convention.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
But outside of that, we'd just all bundle into someone's hotel room and watch it together, and it's a fantastic experience. It's the same of for the iPhone event. I bring my friends over that live in London, so typically Gray and Underscore will come to my studio and we'll watch it as a trio.
Right.
And it's just a ton of fun that way. I get some snacks, we have a good time.
Yep.
Watching it with people is a great experience. This is the best watching party I've ever experienced. There's 1,000 people there or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exciting. And so that was great. The environment was lovely. Going to the Steve Jobs Theater, I didn't know we were going there, so it's an incredible surprise.
That was me last year because they're like, just walk this way, and you go up this hill, and you're like, where are we going? I thought we were going for sandwiches
I thought they were taking us outside.
We were
done.
Yeah, and it was the Steve Jobs Theater, so I knew this year where we were heading, but it's really neat that was a surprise for you.
Yeah, it was a complete surprise. And I have some photos that Underscore knew where we were going, and he took his phone out of his pocket and was taking pictures of my face when I realized it. And it choked me up.
Yeah.
I got quite emotional walking in to that building, because it's something that I care about, but also that it's a memorial building. Right. Right? It does actually serve
it really is.
Purposes. So I think it's quite an emotional place. I've been thinking a lot about this week, about how excited I've been.
Right.
And during the keynote, applauding and stuff. Because there are people around us that don't do this.
Right.
They're I'm a media professional.
Yeah.
And I cannot show emotion. And I'm an enthusiast. I'm not a journalist. And I don't pretend to be one. And I'm proud of not being one. And all of my friends feel differently, right? Because I think if you have a website, I think there is more of a way to consider yourself a journalist, because it's closer to that.
Yeah, maybe. Although I've never considered myself a journalist. I consider myself a writer, which to me is different in that I'm perfectly happy, being enthusiastic about things that I think are cool. I mean, we critique plenty of Apple stuff,
Sure.
but when we're at a keynote and we see a feature that's been announced that we've been talking about and wanting for a year plus,
Yeah.
we get excited, and I clap too.
Being an enthusiast doesn't make me an apologist. Right, like,
Right,
I
exactly.
don't believe that everything that they do is incredible. I think that a lot of things they do aren't, and I'm very happy.
And there's always an asterisk on your clapping, which is, well, once I see this and try it myself, I may not like it, or there might be something that needs to be changed.
What you have shown me, right?
Right.
Like, I was impressed with Stage Manager last
Exactly.
time. It ended up being a disaster, and but now it's like it looks good, right?
And same thing goes with Vision Pro. They, they took you through a very carefully curated demo, and there are undoubtedly things with that just don't even work right now.
And there will be things that won't work right when it's out, too.
Right?
Like they just won't be. And I had none of those. So to finish kind of that part. So like I was very content, and then getting one of the Vision Pro hands-on experiences just threw this thing through the roof. Like I couldn't have had a more perfect experience, because not only did I get to achieve this thing that I wanted, I achieved something I never thought I'd be able to experience, which is I am one of the few hundreds, maybe at most people, who have used the device 6 months, 9 months, maybe even a year, who knows, before this thing is available.
Right.
It's probably 9 months, right? And you think, how many times in the history have they done that, right?
Right.
Maybe this is like the 4th or 5th time that they've allowed people to try a brand new product in advance.
Yeah, until this week, it was only people inside the company. And even then, I mean, we've talked to a lot of Apple people this week who still haven't tried it. I mean,
or even people that have used it haven't done the things we've done.
Right, that too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like my experience wasn't perfect. Like the FaceTime personas thing just did not work.
Yeah.
For me. Like I had a very upsetting experience compared to other people. Like I spoke about it on Cortex, but the one thing that I forgot to mention was, as well as like I had a thing where the person's eyes moved in the wrong direction from each other at one moment, but they also didn't have hair. Which I didn't realize until later.
And as I understand it, it's not just like they were a bald head. It's like their head kind of ended where the hair was supposed to start.
It was like fuzzy. It was a wrong, and then also the demo kind of failed at that point. So I kind of chalk my experience there down to a poor connection, because that was actually being done over the internet. Yeah, there was somebody in Apple Park who was in a conference room.
Sure, somewhere else.
Calls. So they had there were like 12 demo rooms. Right. So they had just 12 people in conference rooms all day conducting this part of the demo.
That must have been a fun job.
I mean, it's probably no different really to the people doing the thing. Yeah. Because they're just like talking you through this one piece. At least they only have to do 2 minutes every session rather than the entire thing.
Right.
But I couldn't have been happier with this experience. Like it was basically perfect. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be weird about it, but I'm very thankful to my PR contacts at Apple that made this happen for me, because the person that I work with knows how much this means to me, and so I'm just very thankful that it happened, because I have no doubt that everybody who got to go see that thing, there had to be some kind of fight as to why that person should go see it.
Oh, I'm sure, because they really, it's just limited.
Everyone wants it.
Most publications, it was only 1, maybe 2 people at most, because it was time constrained. They had a week, they had slots, and they had hundreds more people who would have loved to have tried it than were able to.
Yeah, every single media person, every single developer.
Right.
And I've heard really good things about the evening sessions that they did. So those evening sessions and those day sessions that people weren't sure of. The evening session on Monday was going to the hands-on experience. You go and see the laptops and the Macs and stuff. But then on Tuesday they had those 3 big sessions, right?
Right.
And that was like a talk and run through of what you can do to build for apps. And I've heard nothing but good things about that. People who didn't know what they wanted to do on Tuesday morning, and then by Tuesday evening had an idea.
Oh, that was really smart of them to do that then. Yeah, no, I've talked to a bunch of developers who went to that too, and they loved it. Well, Myke, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's
feel very unwound now.
Good. I hope you're relaxed. You can ease into the rest of your time in America now.
Show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to thank our sponsor, iMazing, for this lovely episode with Myke Hurley. And where can people find you, Myke? I think they know, but remind them.
You can find me on Relay FM. Yeah. If you haven't checked it out, I really recommend the episode of Cortex that we published this week, where if you want to know what it was like to do the Vision Pro demo, I did a full chronological discussion from
Nice.
the moment I got there to the moment I leave.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to listening to that on the way back tomorrow to North Carolina.
It was a good one, so
All
check
right.
it out.
Thanks again, Myke.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.